CNN and Time.
Possibly a major malfunction.
To help you, Doc, I do.
These are the movers and shakers.
I have OJ in the car.
Not keep silent.
Tonight, standing her ground.
It's all right. It's all right. It's all right.
An unlikely crusader.
I don't know if I could have spelled environmental.
Leads a small Texas town into battle against a neighbor they say made their children sick.
They handled every chemical made by man 2 miles from the school.
Chasing the light. He's traveled to the ends of the earth.
Not sure where I want to be at sunset yet.
There's something inside just driving him that he has to go get that photo.
And brings back photographs he hopes will change the way you see the world.
I don't want these to be historical relics of a world that no longer is.
Saving our world. She's out of Africa and on tour.
I wanted to let you know that you're one of my life's heroes.
Why is Jane Goodall trading the jungle for hotel rooms in her fight to protect our closest relatives?
They contributed so much to my life that I felt I had to try and use that knowledge to help them.
She saw Christ in everybody she ministered to.
Fire just completely roars through
The skies over Baghdad.
CNN and Time with Jeff Greenfield and Bernard Shaw.
Good evening and welcome to CNN and Time. Bernard Shaw is off tonight. We devote this whole hour to Earth Day and to what our partners at Time magazine call the heroes of the planet in their global special edition, How to Save the Earth. These are people who celebrate the beauty of our world and its diverse population, human and otherwise, and who are fighting to protect it. To begin, it's happening all over the country, possibly in your own neighborhood. Toxic waste facilities that move in and bring with them a threat to the health of their neighbors. When it happened in tiny Winona, Texas, Winona found a secret weapon, a housewife named Phyllis Glazer. Here's Kathy Slebogan.
12 years ago, Phyllis Glazer, a wealthy Dallas housewife, was looking for a weekend retreat. She and her family bought this luxury ranch 90 miles east of Dallas in a town called Winona, population 457.
It was a real family thing, and my children's friends came, and it was paradise. We loved it so much. My husband got tired of my son and I driving back at the end of the weekend crying. So he said, look, you guys live there, I'll come for long weekends. So that's what we did. And one day I drove my child to school through a chemical cloud that made us very ill.
Glazer says over the next few days, she had a burning sensation in her nose and throat. She didn't know why. What she also didn't know was that 2 miles down the road from her ranch was a plant called Gibraltar that disposed of hazardous waste from some of the biggest industrial companies in the United States. Glazer found out about the plant when she went to a community meeting to meet her new neighbors. She found the town up in arms.
They were screaming about their water, and I was listening to all this, and that's when I realized what that plant did, that they had a hazardous waste injection well facility there where they were injecting untreated, undiluted hazardous waste a mile deep and letting it migrate under all of our lands.
Since it began operations in 1982, Gibraltar had repeatedly violated state law with hundreds of spills, emissions, and explosions. In a confidential inspection report, one customer, Mobil Oil, gave the plant a failing grade, F, for contaminating the groundwater.
People were worried about the water, and the president of the company, I still remember, stands up at this meeting and he says, well, if we contaminate the aquifer, we'll just clean it up. And I stood up and I said, you don't have that kind of money. I don't know of anybody who does.
Glazer, who had led a sheltered life as the wife of a wealthy businessman, says she was surprised by her sudden outburst over the environment.
I don't know if I could have spelled environmental. Believe it or not, I was a very timid, very shy woman.
In the months after the meeting, residents of the poor working-class town began showing up at Glazer's ranch.
I have been there. People were coming by all the time saying they had heard that I'd spoken out at the meeting and did I know what was wrong with their child. And they started bringing me children with birth defects like I could never have imagined in such a small town. So many. Cancers and, I mean, everything.
There were children like Jamesia. Her grandmother, Georgie Jones, says Jamesia suffers from albinism, respiratory problems, and is going blind. She's been hospitalized 3 times for mysterious sores.
Her whole body just got sore. She got where she couldn't hardly walk. She broke out with that, whatever it was that was in her hair and in her mouth. It got in her face and around her neck, in the crevices of her neck.
Glazer discovered Winona was a community overwhelmed with unexplained health problems, birth defects, and premature deaths.
I mean, people were telling me, professionals, sell and run.
Glazer says it was the children who made her stay, and what she had learned from her late father, who had barely escaped the Holocaust.
And I just remembered all the stories my father told me about the Holocaust and all the people that had been coming to my house asking for help. And I said, you know, every once in a while in your life, you have to make a decision based on who you are and what you stand for.
We had really done all that we could do.
Reverend Sylvester Curry, the minister at New Zion Baptist Church, says for years people in Winona smelled the chemical odors from the plant and heard the explosions. They watched their children get sick and were afraid the chemicals were the cause. They hired a lawyer, went to meetings, but the plant remained in operation. Finally, they ran out of money.
And then Phyllis came along, and Phyllis was a fresh, new, person, and not only did she have the will, she had the means, she had the financial, backing that this needed.
We've got to do something because...
Glazer says she spent her entire inheritance, more than $1 million, to hire engineers, geologists, and lawyers to gather the evidence to shut down the plant. She founded Moses. Mothers organized to stop environmental sins. She organized pickets and called in the big city media.
Let them sign our demands.
In 1992, Texas sued Gibraltar for its repeated violations of state law. The company never admitted guilt, but it did pay a fine of over $1 million, the largest civil penalty of its kind in the state. A few days after the penalty, Gibraltar's owners sold the plant to a new company, American Ecology. But the plant never actually closed. State environmental officials say they didn't have sufficient evidence of a health threat to shut it down.
My understanding is that we looked into the situation, but that we could not find a causal link between any of the operations at the facility and any effect on the community.
Glazer hired her own toxicologist, who found chemicals in the groundwater at 100 to 1,000 times above safe drinking water levels. Chemicals the Environmental Protection Agency has linked to neurological impairment, organ damage, and birth defects.
They handled every chemical made by man. 2/10 of a mile from the nearest neighbors, 2 miles from the school.
In 1996, with Glazer's help, 640 people sued American Ecology and the plant's former owners for harming their health and devaluing their property. In court papers, the companies deny responsibility for any injuries, saying the plant was run in compliance with all applicable industry standards. The suit also named 74 customers, many Fortune 500 companies, that shipped waste to the plant for disposal. Almost all of them have settled, paying a total of $15 million. But American Ecology and the plant's former owners are still fighting the lawsuit. It is scheduled to go to trial later this month. American Ecology also sued Glazer for maliciously disseminating patently false and defamatory statements.
They sued me. They sued our organization. They sued my elderly mother. They sued my husband. And they sued his family business, which means his cousins and relatives.
When she countersued, the company dropped its case. In 1997, American Ecology shut down the plant, saying Glazer's relentless legal assault had drained its financial resources and driven away its customers. The company declined CNN and Time's request for an interview, citing the upcoming trial. But Glazer is still fighting. She and other women in the community distribute what they call wasted babies to call attention to the plight of the children who became sick or died while living near the plant.
Michael Williams, he has neurofibromatosis, in lay terms, an elephant man's disease. The Smileys had a beautiful baby daughter, was born healthy, and the two that were born once the facility came in were both born with serious birth defects. Mandy Clark is dead. She came down with Hodgkin's disease when she was 9 years old.
Why? Why would you come into a small town, bring something that you knew was going to be damaging to health? Why?
If you live in a wealthy community, and if you are white, your chances of being the nearest neighbor to a dangerous facility is nil. But if your skin is dark, if you're poor, your chances increase. These companies say it's because the land is cheap in those areas. But I think it's also because there's no enforcement in those areas, or very little of it.
They left us to our own fate.
Now Glazer is going after the state of Texas, which over the years collected $1 million+ in fines from the plant. Last month, she organized a community march to demand that the state pay reparations, including free health care for Winona citizens who are sick and college scholarships for their children.
We want restitution from the state of Texas for all who were exposed here, for the lands that were devalued. They owe that to us now. Yes. Woo!
Texas environmental officials insist the state did its job.
The request for reparations or damages assumes that something was done wrong or something was done incorrectly. And as we've stated repeatedly, we think the enforcement actions were appropriate and timely.
Let my people go.
Glazer says she is now taking her fight beyond Winona to other communities targeted for hazardous waste plants. Are there other Winonas out there?
Oh, thousands, right in this country. Thousands. I want my country back. I want it out of the hands of the lobbyists and out of the hands of big business, and put back into the hands not just of the people, but of the poorest, disenfranchised people. That's who this country belongs to. When you find something that's worth giving your life for, you will change.
Now, Phyllis, I'll always love you for what you did for us. We'd have never gotten here, Phyllis, if you hadn't helped us.
Glazer has recently been working with a Jackson, Wyoming group called Keep Yellowstone Nuclear Free. And in June, the Moses organization will take what it calls its overground railroad to 3 communities in Michigan threatened with hazardous waste. For more on Phyllis Glazer and Moses, log on to CNN and Time online at cnn.com/CNN Time. We'll be back in a moment.
It's July 26th, 1994, and this is the Tuesday edition of Dateline NBC. Tonight.
Was there something in the air over this tiny town?
Having numbness in your legs or arms.
Why were so many feeling sick?
You'll find the same complainers all the time.
They saw trucks come and go.
We were sick for 3 days.
But then a stranger came to town.
I'm their worst nightmare, and darn proud of it.
Could their horror story happen where you live?
Dateline, with anchors Jane Pauley and Stone Phillips. With Brian Ross, Deborah Roberts, John Scott, Lee Thompson, Faith Daniels, Dennis Murphy, John Larson, and Lisa Myers. Dateline continues after this message. Coming up, residents of one tiny town fight back against the dangerous chemicals and the company they say were ruining their lives. People said what went on at this plant left them fighting for air.
I'm only 32 years old, and I don't feel like that I should be having these problems.
Some workers knew there was trouble.
We were just pressured to get the loads out with no regard to the safety of the employees.
Then someone new came to town and gave them the power to fight back. Here again is Stone Phillips.
Imagine how you'd feel if you and your friends and neighbors got sick time after time, and no one seemed to be able to explain what was going on. You'd feel angry, confused, and fearful, and you'd be looking for some answers. Tonight, the story of a town where people were feeling all of those emotions, but didn't have the resources to fight back, until one woman stepped forward.
The explosion filled our lungs, burned our lungs.
I have suffered mouth ulcers, headaches, real bad headaches since January the 7th.
I was nauseous and had the headache, had all the symptoms of the sour gas exposure.
All of these incidents happened here at the Gibraltar Hazardous Waste Disposal and Recycling Plant just outside Winona, Texas. Gibraltar processes untreated toxic waste, some of the most lethal chemicals known to man. The entire operation requires the utmost care and precision, because if incompatible chemicals are mixed, the reactions can be violent.
We are paid to do our job well, and we're paid well for doing the job right.
John Mobley is founder and chairman of Gibraltar. The company president is Mike Stark.
I love the earth. I love the outdoors. I wouldn't be associated with a business that is accused of doing the things that, that our antagonists and our protagonists say that we do.
But ever since it opened 12 years ago, Gibraltar has been cited for violating its permit. Not once or twice or even a dozen times, but hundreds of times, causing groundwater contamination and toxic air emissions.
We don't know what we were exposed to, and these fumes were in our home. It made us sick. We were sick for 3 days.
Wanda Irwin and her husband Danny, who live just a quarter-mile from the plant, say they've been subjected to fumes and odors for years, some of the worst coming on holidays.
You walk out the door and the first thing you smell is Gibraltar. All these toxic gases hit you in your face, and your
Really
kids can't
bad.
even go outside and play with their toys on Christmas morning because the fumes are so bad.
The Irwins say that nearly everyone in their family has been sick with stomach and/or respiratory problems. 2 of the children have had seizures. Wanda's had all kinds of ailments.
I have liver problems. My heart will speed up sometimes past 200. I've had blackouts. I'm only 32 years old, and I don't feel like that I should be having these problems.
You have any numbness in your legs or arms?
My right arm.
Your right arm, okay.
The fact is, in this town of only 457 people, there have been numerous unexplained medical problems, causing enough concern for residents to launch their own 5-year health study.
Try it one more time.
This 7-year-old has a growth problem. She's still wearing size 4 toddler clothes. Her sister was born with tumors in her mouth and webbed toes. This little boy is in the early stages of elephant man's disease, and it does not run in his family.
We have never had a violation or done anything which was an imminent danger to the environment or to human health.
So all of these odors and these burning sensations that people complain about, these are imagined?
You look at the number of complaints and go back and look at the number of people, and you'll find the same complainers all the time.
One family that frequently complained is Marion Stike and her son Randy, whose house is located just 2 miles downwind from the plant.
I would be working in my yard, and chemicals, I would just be engulfed in a plume of chemicals. It might not last for 3 or 4 minutes, but I would be deathly sick.
Mrs. Stike says after a toxic emission in October '91, their chickens stopped laying eggs, and her breasts began lactating as if she were pregnant, At age 66,
They were swollen up under my armpits like that. And my daughter came to hug me for my birthday, and I couldn't take her hug. It was too painful.
Mrs. Dyke has also suffered headaches, memory loss, and uncontrollable trembling, caused, her doctors say, by chemicals in her blood. They say the yellow and blue areas in her brain scans show impaired functioning, consistent with chemical poisoning, and told her she had to move.
I wanted to live in my home. I wanted to live in my grandma's house. But that's not going to happen now.
Residents like Mrs. Dyke and the Irwins say for years their complaints have been dismissed by company officials and regulators alike. Gibraltar paying fines and promising to do better, but nothing ever really changing.
I have gotten so tired of calling and nothing happening.
I tell her, I said, why you call them all the time? She said, well, I think I ought to report it. I said, they ain't not going to do nothing, you know. They hadn't done anything yet.
And things might never have changed in this rural East Texas town if a housewife with a dream of starting an exotic game park hadn't decided that this property was the perfect place to do it.
AD, it's Phyllis Glazer.
Phyllis Glazer moved to Winona 3.5 years ago and says she found out about Gibraltar when she drove her son to school one day through a toxic cloud.
My throat was chemically burned. I have a hole through my septum. Ulcers now running up and down my throat and mouth and nose.
When she learned about Gibraltar's history of violations and the state's inaction, she was incensed.
You have something totally out of control. You have to stop it. You have to stop it, and we must.
Of course, other residents had tried to do just that, to no avail. But Phyllis Glazer had something the others did not, a sizable inheritance.
It takes big money to fight a battle like this. So small little towns that have no one to help them are going to lose everything, and that isn't right.
Glazer says she knew what it meant to feel helpless because her father, a Jewish immigrant, had been forced to flee Europe during the Holocaust. She vowed that she would never turn her back on people whose calls for help were being ignored.